Thanks so much for that nice introduction and for inviting me here today. You can also cancel your studio visit, no pressure. That's putting a lot on this talk that you'll want to run down. But it's really nice to be here. It's been a few years since I've been in Sackville. I got here about 10:30, and I've already hit both your cafes and both your thrift shops, which I enjoyed thoroughly at each one of them. So far, so good. I'm going to start my talk with some kind of meta ideas in very loose ways, and then I'll go into more descriptions about the art I make, but I'll kind of pop back into those meta ideas here and there. And I'll try to be as playful as I can, because I'm talking a lot about plastic pollution, which usually people find a downer. I do too. But I'll try and find some ways to make it palatable. So here's one. What do you think? What does crude oil taste like? I guess. Sweet and sour? Kayla? Stop. You're right, sweet and sour. Yeah, so you open it up, and then it's a thumbs up underneath. So you're right, it is sweet and sour. So what this strange thing is part of an oil museum exhibit that I visited in Stavanger in Norway. And most of Norway's economy is based on oil. And you may or may not know, oil is a key ingredient in plastic. Sometimes when I tell people that, they're quite surprised. But there's a link between that industry and the plastic industry. So I was really interested in this museum because they seem to be trying to find all sorts of different ways to get people to understand a material in a slightly unexpected but bodily way. And never before had it even crossed my mind what crude oil might taste like until I came up to that display in the museum. And I found that really interesting. Another thing I'm really interested in, and my students make fun of me when I say interested too much. I'm trying to find a synonym for interested. If anyone's got one, please let me know. But a big part of my practice is thinking about objects as evidence of something. So I'm really interested in found objects, found material, and then when I find that thing, whatever it is, looking as closely as I possibly can at it to pull out what it says about us and how we got here at this moment. So here's a photo I took at a previous university I used to work at, Western University, which is dear in my heart also. But I was collaborating with a geologist for a project, which I'll show you in a little bit. And when I would walk to her office to meet her, I kept walking by this Imperial Oil Lecture Theater, which was the main lecture hall for the Earth Sciences department. And that was just another thing that sort of flagged me like, okay, that's weird. That here's a public institution, but the main lecture hall for the Earth Sciences department is sponsored by Imperial Oil. What does that say about what's taught in the classroom, and what kind of connections does that make? And it's a pretty interesting program in my experience, having worked with Patricia now since 2013, where there's a lot of people that go into earth sciences with a lot of environmental interests, but there's a lot of jobs on the other end of an earth science degree in mining and extraction, assessing out geological areas for what can be extracted from them. So there's this really interesting bump up against how you feel when you go in and the job you get when you go out. So I'm interested in what else is possible. Here's another thing I'm interested in. When material fails and what that might mean. So I look a lot at advertisements. I'm sure everyone has seen advertisements. I'm particularly interested in vinyl wraps. So adhesive vinyl that's been printed with an advertisement on it, and then it can stick to anything. And it's really getting quite amazing in terms of the innovation of the chemistry behind what it can stick to. A crumbling brick wall, a bus, a taxi, the back of a bathroom stall. I find that ability of advertisement to adapt so easily a very interesting, a very apt match with how colonialism works. Looking for a territory to exploit and make money off of. So I'm looking for that in my environment all the time. I have my phone with me all the time, looking for evidence of that. And here was a little moment that I really liked. This was on the side of a bus, and is there a pointer? I guess I'll just walk over. You can see the rivets in the truck up at the the top there. And so one of the rivets just kind of lined up in a spot that sort of looks like a cold sore on the model. And I'm not anti-cold sore. I get cold sores myself. But something I just thought interesting about this was that when even cold sore medication advertisements don't show a cold sore. Like there's a real like cleaning up of like no, everything's good that happens in the world of the ad. That is fascinating, and I think says a lot about where we are right now, where the void of an emptiness meets up with a promise of a commercial image. So I'm looking for those little things. And then last one. So this is wind slits that get cut into very large banners. And I actually did research about this, if you can call that research. But I was going to graphics companies saying, okay, is it like a machine that decides where to cut the wind slits in it? Or like, how did this happen there? And I said, oh, no. It's a person with a roll of tape and a utility knife, and they just kind of trace half the roll of tape. So this is someone's like joke, which now we know the joke. That was their like sort of insider coded thing. Okay, so that's the meta stuff. Now I'm going to go into art practice. And one thing I'll say too, because we're in an art school, is I don't want to give the impression that I had everything all sorted out, nice and neat, and then I made the piece and that was it, and look how clever I am. That's never how I make anything. I aspire to that, but it's just not the reality. I have intuitions, I do some research, I explore some things. While I'm making it, I'm analyzing it, I'm thinking about what it is, but most of the thinking happens on the other end for me when it's finished and I'm looking at what I've done and then I'm relating it back to what I'm looking at in the world. So an early talk I gave at NASCAD, a student afterwards said like, wow, well you've got everything sorted out, and I felt, no, I've just given such a false impression of myself. So anyway, okay, so what you're looking at here is a 1998 Pontiac Sunfire. And when I finished my grad degree at the University of Victoria, I applied for a commission at the Toronto Sculpture Garden in Toronto, and it was my first public commission. I was successful in it, and the pitch was to take a crappy car that was in bad shape, but something about the design of it, like the form of it, looked like to me that it was aspiring to be a faster model of car. So I took this car and then I wrapped it in an advertising skin, so that very adhesive vinyl that I'm talking about, to make it look like a Porsche 911, and a current model of Porsche 911. So this was in 2008. Some photos. And so it's entirely a trompe-l'oeil sticker. So you can get a sense of the headlight, the image of the headlight as a sticker put onto the old headlight of the car. Same thing with the hubcaps. That's a 2D image. It's just the quality makes it, the projector makes it look like it's an actual hubcap, but it's just printed flat onto a plexi circle and sort of snapped into the hubcap. And I also did the inside as well, because why stop just at the outside? So every piece of carpet, the stereo, the upholstery, everything got recovered in an image of the fancier model. Something that happened there in that process, though, that I haven't really stopped thinking about since, is in order to keep my prices low, the graphics company I worked with allowed me to work in the shop with them alongside the process. And when we got to the interior of the car, they were not happy with me, because I was asking the material to do something that it wasn't specifically designed to do. And their job as an ad company is for you never to see the material of the ad. They want you just to think about the image on the ad. If the message fails because you're thinking about the medium, they've screwed up in their job. Meanwhile, though, I was getting really excited. The more kind of bubbles and puckers and wrinkles that were happening, the more I thought something sculpturally interesting was starting to happen, because I was forcing this luxury image onto something that was rejecting it. And then another thing that happened, when they were working on my Porsche, they made an error. and they said, oh, don't worry about it. Here, just go throw it in the back, in the dumpster in the back. And so I took my roll of vinyl, even though it was really pretty, and I went into the back and chucked it into this dumpster, and I kind of peer in the dumpster, and it was filled with a rainbow of colors of this material. So this was an extremely common occurrence. And meanwhile, this material is very expensive. It cost $5,000 to wrap that car with this grant. So that was a lot of money, especially to my just got out of school broke self. And here I looked in this dumpster, and there was tens of thousands of dollars worth of vinyl in this dumpster, just because the client changed their mind, or the printer made a little burst of ink somewhere, or the ad team decided to take a new approach. And that was quite stunning to me as to, okay, wow, not only is there this material reality to the things we're buying, there is a material reality to the things that are selling us what to buy, and then there's just the simple waste of the things that are being printed to sell us the things that we're buying. Whoa, it's just this Russian doll of whoa, where it kept expanding. And so that was an area that I decided to hone in on for a good chunk of time afterwards, and continue to do afterwards. So these pieces are literally an advertisement that was taken down and scrumpled up, and a friend at 3M thought I would like them. And so he left them by my office door one day, and I was working on a show, and there was 3 sculptures right there in my office door, finished, ready to go. So thank you. That worked out really well. And people are often surprised that I didn't make them, because looking at them, they look, to me, they look like if you're cleaning off a palette from paint, if you got palette on a glass tray and then you're scraping it off. Any painters who've ever really got excited about what's happening in your palette, the color mixing. So I became really interested in that. And I also started hoarding, which is tends to be a sculptor affliction. And I just started collecting things. I started working with a whole bunch of different graphics companies who knew that I liked this stuff, and so they would save it and give it to me. They were happy to do so. There were some rules. I wasn't allowed to put out any identifiable logos, so I couldn't have a big Coca-Cola thing or Jerry Seinfeld's face, something recognizable. But otherwise, it was fair game, because they had to pay to take it to the landfill. It's non-recyclable, and so the material itself is polyvinyl chloride, which of all the types of plastic, this is the most toxic. Put in the landfill, it slowly leaches into soil and the water table, and in production, in the factory, it releases a colossal amount of chemicals into the atmosphere as well. So it is a nasty type of plastic. And it's my chosen medium, hooray. But I'm envious of artists who have a pure love with their chosen material. I have this struggle of being seduced constantly by the gloss and the color, and totally repulsed by the environmental toxicity. But I try to harness that energy into the works I make. So we'll see. This is a piece made from a Subaru ad. There was something about the form of it that looked to me like a dorsal fin. And so I just tried to go with the form of the scrap that I was getting. Another piece from salvaged material, or two different pieces. I'll just go quickly to give you a sense. The piece on the left is a 2-parter, so this is the front. And then you look on the side, and from a printing, so the printer of the greenery took the photo and then mirrored it in order to make sure that there was enough image to go all the way to the border. And what happened is, maybe you can see it, this kind of devil face of that's a horn, that's the 2 eyes, kind of emerged accidentally out of that very standard printer procedure to extend an image. And I liked that, obviously. Another piece called Battle of Leisure. And as I said, I'm looking for evidence in these ads all the time. And so something that I found I was seeing a lot of was images of nature, ironically. So here we have this super toxic material, but all sorts of natural imagery being used as part of a sales pitch within the toxic material. And And I continue to be interested in how signs that nature, our idea of nature, is mediated and externalized outside of our body. So those of you who are going deep in the criticism, eco-criticism of this, there's a writer named Greg Girard, and he unpacks a term, a German word that means Bestand, or is Bestand, and that translates in English to standing timber. And Bestand is used to describe a forest. So right in the word there is an encoded way of looking, instead of looking at a forest as an ecosystem, it's looked at in the word, thinking of it as standing timber. We're looking at it as potential money to be made. I think that that phenomenon right there is why we're in such an eco crisis at this moment. So how do we frame that? How do we unpack that? How do we start thinking differently in terms of us? We're nature. We are part of nature. Nature's not something over there. It's right here in this room. Okay, so I have 2 scientific slides, and then I swear I'll get back to art photos, but stay with me for a little bit. Something started to happen in my hoarding, which I alluded to earlier. I was in my studio on a residency, and I was starting to feel high, and not a good high, and I didn't know why. But a friend came in and was like, I know why. Look at your pile of vinyl here absolutely reeks. And it's true. I had a massive quantity of vinyl in my studio, and it was off-gassing into the space. And as I was working with it, I was getting some kind of not good effect from it. That's surprised me because I am a sculpture nerd, and I read the material safety data sheet for my chosen material, and it said nothing about don't have too much of it or you'll get strange effects or anything like that. That was about 10 years ago. They've since been updated. So I have a friend now who's working, it's called a weeder, which is when they print vinyl signs, they pull out the excess that isn't used. And he's encouraged now to wear a respirator, but it's not mandatory. So there's starting to be an awareness that oh, wait a minute, there is a toxicity to this material. It takes about 30 days to off-gas. So what I'm doing now is I will put it in a place like a fume hood where it can off-gas until it's safer for me to use. But that moment when I didn't know, and I was really surprised that I had just exposed myself without knowing, again became another motivation for the type of work I was doing. And I started to dig deeper in terms of the research. I went to the library and started learning about plastics. What is this stuff? What chemicals are in it? Who's researching this? Who's making it? Who's profiting off it? I learned all sorts of interesting things, particularly to me around industry secret. For me to go and get the exact recipe and material composition of the vinyl I was working with, it was a complete impossibility because all that information is protected for industry so that industry doesn't get scooped by another business that then makes their product. So the very thing that's protecting the company making money is harming the individual using it. So, crazy world. I don't need to tell you all that. But anyway, back to this slide. So I started getting into science. And how many people have heard of the plastic gyres? A few of you? But what about okay, that's pretty good. There was a while where no one did. So what you're seeing here is there's starting to be, I'm sure actually as I say this, it will probably click in because it's been in all the news and people's inboxes lately. But as plastic accumulates in the planet, it's starting to accumulate in several zones within oceans because of how ocean currents push floating plastic debris together. So what you're seeing here is a color representation of where that plastic debris is most concentrated floating. And the red parts are, okay, so a little too hard for me to see. I think it's one, okay, so I'll go up close so I can see it. Hang on. So the red parts are more than 1 million pieces per square kilometer, which is a lot of plastic. The other kind of frightening thing, can you handle it if I tell you one more upsetting fact, and then I'll swear I'll like tell a joke after? Do you want the real version, or you want the like slightly sugar-coated so we can make it through the rest of the week version? Real. Okay, let's get real. The add-on to this is that of all the plastic produced in the world, at one time, 49% of it floats. So this data only pertains to half of the plastic that's out there. The rest of it is probably at the bottom, but it's a tricky thing to study, right? Because there's a lot of parts of the ocean that are really hard to get to. So the research team I'm involved with is also looking at what's called benthic plastics, which is plastics buried in the sediment of bodies of water. But I told you I wouldn't give you too much bad news. We'll just skip that one. Back to the story part. So in 2013, I went to a talk by a plastic pollution activist named Charles Moore. And he came to my university. At the university, he spoke for free, which I thought was unbelievable. So the person that invited him just flew him in. And he's so passionate about plastics pollution that he was willing to spend his time in this way. And so that's him at the bottom right. And he gave this really incredible talk. And at the end of the talk, he said, he showed this picture of what he thought was lava erupting on an island in Hawaii, coming down the side of the island, and interacting with plastic debris washing up from shore from the Pacific Gyre that I've just talked about. And it was this like really like wild, mangled looking thing. And so at the end, he said, I really call upon a geologist to go and check this out, because I think there's something interesting there. And sure enough, the person that invited him to speak was Patricia Corcoran, and that's her at the top left there. And at the end of the talk, I sought out Patricia because I said, hey, I'm really interested in plastic pollution too. We should hang out or go for coffee. And she said, well, do you want to go to Hawaii? And the reason why she asked was because she was, like I was extremely interested in what Charles Moore had just said, but as a basic rule of fieldwork, she can't go on her own to do fieldwork. It's considered an unsafe practice. But she didn't have any funding or grants to do this. So she said, well, if you come as my field buddy, we can go check this out together. So that's what we did. And like just having met that one time, we like packed our bags and went on a camping trip together. And it was a life-changing experience. We arrived there and immediately looked at records of volcano eruptions, because the story we were chasing was like, whoa, lava, wow, plastic, like, doesn't that sound epic and fascinating? But immediately what we saw is that there hadn't been a volcanic eruption in that area for decades. So there's no way that this fresh stuff on the beach with the Barbie legs sticking out of it was from 1950. So we looked a little closer, and we started talking really carefully with the local guides we were working with too, and they were frustrated that, like, of course not, this isn't made from lava, this is made by people. This beach is so polluted, you can't have a campfire on this beach without melting plastic. So what's happening is, this has been a long time local beach, well before the plastic gyre started washing up debris like a conveyor belt. And so if you have a fire there, you're going to melt plastic, and that's what's forming these substances. So initially, we were kind of disappointed, but I kind of got excited. Not to be a disaster tourist or something like that, but to me it was extremely interesting that it was a cultural problem 3 times over. So I said interesting again. So plastic is synthesized by humans. It is poorly disposed of by humans. It enters the water and through currents ends up on this beach, and then it is burned again by humans. So as an artist, that's like an uber cultural object. That says so much about where we are and how we got here. And through talking together, we started to talk about this idea that I had heard in buzzing up a lot in the art world called the Anthropocene. I don't know if anybody's heard of that for just a big show at the AGO and the National Gallery. And Patricia, so we started talking about, well, could this be related to the Anthropocene? Is this object, this strange stone, could that be evidence of the geology of the Earth changing? And Patricia immediately was like, well, if it's buried, yes. And so what we started to do, instead of looking for lava, we started digging on the beach to get a sense of what was happening to this material. And in fact, it was as the plastic debris melted and fused with the sediment, it was getting denser. And because it was denser, it had a greater potential to be buried under the sand instead of like the light plastic, which tends to float around on the surface of beaches until it breaks up more and more. And so we wrote a scientific paper together, which I was very proud of. And I thought it was so funny that it says like Kelly Jazvac Visual Arts on this scientific paper. We described this new stone as plastiglomerate, so that's the name we gave to it. And this is Ron and Noni Sanford, and I include them in every talk I give about this because I think what is so fascinating to me as an artist, and I think really important for everyone that makes objects. Ron and Noni Sanford had a really good idea of what was happening in that scenario as locals using that beach regularly. And so I felt like I had sort of come in on the horse of science authority unintentionally, but because we could write it into paper and say it was so, it had this different kind of clout, right? But I think if we're thinking about the future, we really have to think about local knowledge. And I think we wouldn't have gotten where we got in that paper if we hadn't talked carefully to Ron and Noni first. They've been longtime volunteers for the Hawaiian Wildlife Fund, and they personally, they spend their free time driving their truck to these beaches in Hawaii that have a lot of plastic pollution, loading them up and taking it to a safe dump site so it's not a danger to animals and plant life. They're amazing people. They've literally personally removed tons and tons of this material off these beaches. On that top, you can just see that's Ron sort of standing on the cliff, and then there's his truck down just on the top, and he's got a winch so they can hook up nets and winch it up. And that's what these things look like. So melted plastic, but also natural materials. You can see basalt rock in there, sand. There are two examples, shells. And then how these objects have come to live. I mean, I guess one thing I should say with that scientific article, it went viral as far as I've understood what viral means. As soon as we published it, it was picked up by the New York Times and then American Scientific and National Geographic, and it just kind of, it held something for people's imagination about, wow, okay, here is a visible thing that we can talk about when we talk about humans' impact on the planet. And so, I'll talk a little bit more about where we're going later, but those objects kind of started to have this dual life. They were scientific specimens, they were scientific evidence, but I was also using them as cultural objects. I was using them as artworks, and I continue to, and show them in museums, galleries, etc. And why I'm interested in doing that is because what can happen in an art gallery is a little different than what can happen in a scientific paper or even a natural history museum, which I love natural history museums. I find them fascinating places. But there's a sense when you're moving through a natural history museum, when you see an object, and then you read the panel about the object, and then you're like, oh, okay, that's what that is, next. There's kind of an authority to it. The beautiful thing about the museum and the gallery to me is that the things inside they're messing with you a little bit. They're asking you to stretch yourself. They're asking you, what am I? What do you think I am? What do you think it means to put me here? And it's those questions that I think are really important at this moment when we don't have a clear picture forward of what to do about this. I mean, this is happening in real time right now as we try to scramble and figure out how to right the ship again. So this is an example of an installation for a gallery. I salvaged this used jewelry case that was a little, it looks quite fancy in this photo, but it was quite scratched up in person. Photos tend to make things look clean. But and then I had two signs that I had also salvaged from an ad company. I think they were for a gym or something, like a high school gym, like the home team and the guests. And I just simply inverted them. I like the idea of, alongside these objects, thinking about, okay, who's home and who's a guest, who came from where and who claims that something is from elsewhere. And that came about from, most of the plastic on that beach is not from Hawaii. I can't, a scientist would be like, oh, you can't really say that because you don't have the exact, but to me it's pretty clear. And if I listen to Noni, my local expert, she would be like, oh, well, like none of it is from Hawaii. Like she would catalog fishing tags, toothbrushes, objects with other languages written on them. She had a really good sense of where these objects were coming from, but the way ocean currents were working was bringing a lot of it to this place. So, I mean, again, this kind of this hole that I'm going down gets deeper, because it's not, the problem with pollution is that it doesn't just stay tidally in one spot, it moves. And so one person's profit can mean someone else's poison in another place. And if we throw in histories of power and colonialism and poverty into that, we tend to see that pollution is stronger, as we've seen in Flint, Michigan, where poverty is higher. So that is like the deeper I dig in here, the more expansive the problem gets. Another view. This is a sand sample from the beach. So I simply took a bag and went like this in the sand. And this gives you a pretty good idea of how little sand is on the surface of that beach. Okay, I'm going to go into a different mode now. So that was the heavy part of the talk. I've got like 10 minutes left before questions and things. I'll go into like some more upbeat stuff. But I guess if there's like a takeaway from this talk, and assuming I'm speaking to a room of artists and those interested in art, is knowing more will make your art better. Whatever, like even if it doesn't directly, like, okay, I researched this thing, this book, and I'm going to illustrate in this art. Like, I'm not advocating that at all. Usually that actually doesn't turn out well. But the more you can equip yourself with some background, the better intuitive decisions you'll make in the process. So I'm hoping to just give you a sense of what I'm thinking about and how I get to the next place. Okay, so I'm going to go to a different project. This is in Toronto. It's not on a polluted beach. Anyone been to Honest Ed's in Toronto? Yeah, such a great place. It was an early discount store at Bloor and Bathurst in Toronto. It was the slogan was "Come in and get lost." It was like this labyrinth place where you could find all sorts of very strange things. It closed recently and is being redeveloped into new living quarters. I want to say condos, but I think that the plan is actually more complex than condos. I think there's multi-uses happening in that. But in any case, I was commissioned by David Mirvish Productions to do a piece in a space within that Mirvish village that just kind of was a marker of something ending. So the Mirvish village was sold, and this new production company was coming in to development company was coming in to develop housing. And I was asked to do something in this space, and specifically in the David Mirvish Gallery, which I knew as the David Mirvish Books on Art store. And it was a place I worked outside when I finished school, and I was a super broke artist. I was living on my sister's couch. And I was so grateful to have this place as a job because it was like a whole other education. All the books were on art, and I was just constantly flipping through, reading art books, and it was magical. So I was really disappointed to hear it closing. And another kind of super special thing about it is that when David Mirvish was building the gallery, he's a big collector of abstract painting, and he knew Frank Stella. And Frank Stella said, oh, if you're building a gallery, can you make it at least 50 feet wide so I could make a 50-foot wide painting? Because I've never made a painting that big. And David Rivers did it. And so Frank Stella ponied up and made the biggest painting of his career to date. And that's just a chunk of it. Sorry, I don't have, do I have a bigger photo there? I have it being rolled up. Sorry, I'll go back. This massive, gorgeous piece that was in the bookstore as well. So like not only was I amongst all these books, but I was also amongst this amazing piece. And when the bookstore finally closed, the piece was sold, and it was so massive. I just thought that was fascinating for when art objects get moved. A team was brought in from New York to carefully disassemble the painting, roll it, and ship it to make sure that it wasn't damaged at all, because it is a valuable art object. So that was that kind of history. I had a deep love for the space and the people that made it happen. And I was also just kind of blown away by the scale and the ambition of making a gallery on this premise of scale. Like let's make a big gallery so we can make big work to put in it. But because I work with advertisements, I also was quite aware of this other kind of scale, which is that city scale. And so for the project, I went on the internet and I bought a skid of used billboards with no idea of what it said on the billboards. And so it's actually a really cheap way to buy material if anybody's looking to buy a lot of material. Like each billboard was about $120, and I'm talking like 80 feet by 15 feet worth of material. Like it was massive. And when it arrived, I was working with 2 students, and the building I was in was kind of like this setup. And we had to roll them down on the ground floor, or roll them out on the outside. And then we ran up to the top floor of the building and looked down at the window so we could see what we were looking at, because it was so big. And what it was, I got all sorts of things. A few of them were related to lawyers and casinos, interestingly. One was a giant iPod ad, and Uggs shoes. There was a big Uggs shoes thing. But in any case, I took those billboards and I was interested in slicing them and reworking them and finding ways to just disrupt the image subtly in kind of a nod to Frank Stella in terms of his scale and his optics, but also a new piece. I didn't want to simply remake a Frank Stella as an appropriation kind of thing. So this is the installation. What looks like the white wall of the gallery here is in fact the back of the billboard. And so I cut slices in the billboard to then have little peep-throughs of images that were behind. And then there was this really, can I get it going? Oh no. There it is. There was this nice optical effect that happened. So at the very back, behind there, are the former bookshelves of the store. And the few books that were kicking around that hadn't been sold on the internet yet were on these shelves. And people were invited to kind of pass through the curtain and just browse the books as part of the installation. And they sold some books too out of that process, so, so that's good. Oh, and I should also mention that I turned up there was fans in the store, and I turned them up to 11 because they were like, oh, well, the building's going, sure, go for it, turn it up. So the fans were going much higher than they should in terms of maintaining a motor over a long period of time, but it made this kind of current in the space that allowed all those little pieces that I had cut to flutter. Oh, this was a strange one. This was so amongst in the billboards, there was like this large schedule for a casino, or it was a conference about how to make more money at your casino. So there was all these like really strange workshop titles called like attracting millennials with the click of a button, and like gambling as game, and like just the strange, like it was just this little sort of snapshot into like, oh right, like there are teams of people thinking about how to make us click on something at all times. Like that's fascinating. Oh, there we go. All about attracting millennials. And the other nice part was I just can't see in this photo so well, but all the room numbers were names of Renaissance artists. So there was the Michelangelo room and the Leonardo room and that kind of thing. And just in the hallway, as you go into the installation, I had two little nods. One was a photo down here of the bookstore, which was a favorite place for local authors to have their openings when they would launch a book. So just down below is at an opening when a huge amount of people came up. And then at the top is author Jane Jacobs. She had asked to have her book launches there as well. And those of you who don't know who she is but might be interested in how cities are planned, she really is an incredible thinker. So I'd encourage you to Google her if that's something you're interested in. Okay, home stretch, last show. Just a few more minutes. The last show I had in Toronto was called Proofs of Performance, and it was at Gallery TPW. The title came from a piece of vinyl that I scrapped of that name. And I liked that it seemed like a blank slate, like I could just sort of picture some boardroom somewhere where that was going to be put up and be like, okay, let's list all our proofs of performances, everybody, and that kind of neoliberal impulse to make sure everyone is performing optimally and trimming any fat where anybody seems to be not serving the bottom line well. So this is as you enter in the gallery. I continued to work with that massive billboard from the Mervish project. That was an iPhone ad, one of those said like shot by Hannah on her iPhone 5 or something like that. But there was this nice little detail in that photo, is at the top corner it said image reformatted for scale. So that it was an ad showing off the quality of a camera, but then there was this disclaimer on it saying that like actually we've photoshopped this pretty heavily to to make it look this way. So I liked that allusion to performing well, but immediately the caveat like, oh, actually not quite that well. And then you come through the space, and the curtain's kind of dirty because it was outside for a long time. I did wash it very well, but it just keeps the marks of its use. And then there was a small space at the front, and I had 3 collage smocked works in there. There's one. And they were all made from that billboard section. I cut out faces from them and then figured out ways to use a hand sewing technique called smocking to interrupt the image in some way. So here I like the idea that I was adding something that might allude to like worry lines within this massive forehead. A detail. There's another one. This one's called smocking mouth. So there's this kind of like pout it's a rosebud smocking technique, but just puckers the mouth together. Can you make that out a bit where the face is? Is it sort of? And another one. The title of this one is Smocking Eye, but I had nicknamed it Labia Eye, which I thought was like this powerful thing, like it's watching you. And then in the last room was a video, which stemmed again from my scientific research, and in working with Patricia, I started working with this amazing young woman named Annika Belant, who is a brilliant research scientist, but she's actually quit science in order to devote her time to activism and outreach, mostly with youth. So she's doing kind of amazing plastic pollution things with young people in Long Beach, California, and she invited me to a conference held by youth. It was organized by youth for youth about plastic pollution solutions. And I was like weeping the whole time. It was the most beautiful, if this talk is a downer, know that there are incredible people working so hard at this. I couldn't believe what these young people, and like we're talking like 15, 14, 13 years old, had like actually pressured a senator to make a new policy, or had developed a product to cut a massive amount of waste in their home area. So it's very buoying. But anyway, Annika, in her master's thesis, she was taking samples out of the bottoms of lakes. So again, like looking for where the plastic is in the bottom of the lake. And she was trying to figure out a way to best sort it, because as maybe you've heard in the news, plastic can get really, really small. If you wash a polar fleece shirt, tons and tons of plastic, tiny little bits of plastic are leaking into the water system. So how do we get a sense of knowing how much is there? And her way of doing it, so she tried sieving and all these other things, but in the end, it was simply with tweezers and a microscope and going through her samples one by one, separating the natural sediment from the synthetic object. And she was so good at it. I couldn't stop watching her do it because I tried to do it, and the scale is just so crazy. What looks like pliers here, like those two kind of pinchers, is like the finest little tweezers you can imagine. And she would since get calls from all over the world saying like, hey, how did you separate that? How did you arrive at that data? And she said, oh, I did it by hand. And like everyone was just like, what? How long did that take you? But it's that kind of like willingness to commit to something that just kind of floors me and I find really exciting. So this video was of her doing that. I'm just gonna pull it up. This is my reading for my class earlier this week. It's very good if anyone needs a 4-minute video that people will actually read. Excellent. I'm going to put it on mute. Oops. But I just want to give you a sense of the visuals as I talk about the sound. And the reason it's on mute is because the sound would blow out these speakers if I put it on. The sound, oh, it's not working. Oh, sorry. Hang on. There it is. Okay, so the visuals is Annika sorting the plastic pollution through a microscope. The sound is myself, or a reenaction of an interview I did with myself and an interplanetary geologist named Catherine Niche. And in talking with her, I became fascinated about rules for protecting human contamination on other planets. Like there are so many rules set up to make sure that humans don't contaminate other planets. And yet in the interview, I was just like, well, what about Earth? Well, what about Earth? What about, like what? Like how come we're so worried about protecting this, but we haven't protected this at all? And so that dialogue becomes a conversation of two women talking about that phenomenon. And then once we had finished that, I gave the footage and the dialogue to a friend who's a drummer, Jen Hutton, who went to school with, who's based in LA now and is a great drummer. And she developed this kind of drum beat that slowly crescendos to the end of the video, where by the end, the two women are screaming to be heard over this really like kind of rocking jazz type drum beat that, it's not even moving. I'm blowing the technology. There we go. By the end, and so it takes a lot of like, you can either listen to it on headphones or like through carefully mixed sound, but my favorite kind of reaction to it was someone who said like, oh, that is so Riot Girl. It just has this hope and anger and calling out the hypocrisy to it that is an energy I'm trying to keep going in my work in a positive way, because I find I'm getting a lot of energy from that way of thinking about the world. Okay, like what can I actually do? Where's a foothold in this so that we can go forward? And I'm sure it's boring to watch a video without sound, but I just want to give you a sense of kind of what the footage and scale looks like as she's picking out pieces. And another kind of beautiful thing of her method is when, watching her, she will take the tweezers and she'll feel something. So there's times when she knows it's synthetic because of how it feels in her tweezers squeezing it ever so slightly, but that's the only way she would know. So there's something about like really knowing a material through your body and being dedicated enough to take the time to work through it that I find so admirable. And I'll minimize it just so you can still watching it if you're mesmerized by it, but if you're bored by it, you can go somewhere else. But I wanted to just bring up one, so where I'm going with everything now is Patricia and I have found a remarkable crew of like-minded people, and we formed a collective called the Synthetic Collective. And so we're trying to take that initial starting point of an artist and a scientist working together from the get-go of a research point to talk not only about the scientific implications, but the cultural implications, with the hope of making the science link to people a lot faster. And we're taking that method to look at the Great Lakes. And so we've just done a massive pellet count looking at, so that thing that kind of looks like the world right there in the microscope is called a nurdle, and that is a little piece, a little unit of plastic that is melted and then formed into a product. What we're finding in the Great Lakes is there's a lot of those nurdles. So it hasn't even got to a consumer yet. Here we're all feeling guilty because we used a water bottle this morning, or we forgot our to-go cup at the coffee shop. But meanwhile, the amount of pollution that industry is putting directly into the water in the Great Lakes anyway is pretty staggering. So our eye of Sauron is directed right at industry right now, looking at, okay, what's being protected and shouldn't be protected, who's polluting and shouldn't be. So that work will come out shortly in terms of a scientific paper, and then an exhibition as well from that research process. And I think I'll end there. Thank you so much for your attention. With vinyl? It just already looked like an art material to me. That dumpster looked like a paint palette. It was so colorful and they're well-designed, honed colors. So, I think artists are really good at that. Like looking, okay, what can be my material? I mean, there's a group of students at Concordia right now that are doing all sorts of amazing things with kombucha scobies. Like they're like, yes, that's the art material I want to work with. And so, like, I had no idea that you could do so much with kombucha scobies, but it's coming. It's going to be big. Yeah, that is such a great question. I try my best to apply sustainable practices in my art, and some of the scientists that I've collaborated with have been like, listen, if you're making art about the environment, you can't be polluting the environment in the process. Like, they will not accept that. Whereas others are maybe a bit more like, well, okay, like, if the message offsets some of the impact, and maybe that's worthwhile there. So I can't say I'm like perfectly clean and green, but I do try to use as much salvage materials. I try to get things to the gallery in sneaky ways as opposed to like making big crates and shipping them expensively. I try to source stuff locally. So for example, that display case, that piece that was home and guest with the plastiglomerates in the display case, that's on exhibition in Poland right now. And there was a conversation of, well, do we just ship the whole thing from New York? And I was like, no. What do you got there already? And so, like, just trying to think of other ways that like are better. And I mean, the nice part about it is it makes me a lot more chill. Like, I don't have to be like a kind of princess diva. Like, no, it must be this way. It's like, no. Let's find the best compromise based on what's most ecological. And I'm interested in teaching too. Sculpture is a notoriously wasteful area in an art program, and you have to make a mess to learn, but there's lots of ways that you can think about what you're making and kind of optimize. So my students are experimenting with algae mold making right now, which is going okay. The gelatin glycerin mold making is a much more eco-friendly way of making molds, but anyway, it's fun to like work with them on developing recipes. Like, I like that I don't know the answer, and I like that as a problem in a classroom. Hmm. No, yeah, no, I really appreciate that question also. And I would say, I mean, I wouldn't be so like grandiose as to say like I'm changing the world, but like that's that drive. Yeah, and that drive is so interesting to me. That Theaster Gates link I've got here, where is it? He talks about how art can change the world, and he really believes that, and I think his practice is showing us how it can. For me, artists need to be careful and savvy about not getting seduced entirely by the beauty of something. I think beauty is a tool to attract viewers, and even Patricia said, you know, if plastiglomerate was like just all gray or something, I bet it never would have gone viral in the way it did. Like there's something about its aesthetics that makes an editor say like, oh yeah, that's the image we want. So that's nothing to scoff at. That's an important tool. But I also, you know, the ugly other side of that is there's been a lot of interest in like, it is okay, how can we synthesize this? It's so beautiful. So I mean, there's a group of architects at the University of Michigan who got a big grant to synthesize plastiglomerate. And so they started diverting plastic from a Detroit recycling facility in order to melt down and make this plastiglomerate. And I was just like, what, are you serious? No, this is evidence of something, not a cool new resource to extract. But at the same time, that like there again is that evidence of like, oh right, we're thinking like capitalists because that's the system we're in and that's what we understand. But like, how can we imagine our way out of that? What other options are there? And I think Theaster Gates is an amazing model for that. Like he's thinking of a way to mess with the system. Yeah, I really like a good friend of mine, Sarah Nasby, who also went to Guelph. We were talking about teaching, and she said, teaching can be tricky because learning is uncomfortable. And to learn, you have to feel uncomfortable for a bit before you get to the other side and understand it. And I think that comes out like flashing at you when you start to collaborate with other people. Like I was asking so many stupid questions because well, what's the difference between a rock and a stone? Or like, I don't know, where does lava come from? I don't know. I was getting this like kind of crash course in Geology 101 in order for me to like catch up with Patricia. But it was the same, it was the same back and forth. Like, you know, she was like, so like, what is the value of the humanities? We were discussing on this beach. And through that process, we've had amazing humility with each other. So just being like being willing to look like you don't have the answer, I think is so important in the collaborative process. And then yet still having a respect for the other person's work. So if you've got that in place, I think you can get a good collaboration going. And for me, that helps connect like what we're doing in the studio when we're looking down, absorbed in our material, and what do we see when we look up every once in a while? Like how do we connect our little world here with the big world out there in a meaningful way? And I think that only will make your art stronger if you can find that connection. Yes, she's amazing. And one of those like tough-ass scientists who's like, no, you can't be polluting the environment if you're making work about environmental art. But yeah, she's incredible. She's an undergrad from here. Oh, you should like put her face on a banner somewhere, and not a plastic banner, a paper banner. And she's being really brave when it comes to speaking out about this because it's such a big issue. It's so complicated. It's easy to feel bummed out about it. And so like when I don't know how many times I've heard from people like, oh, you're working on plastic? I thought like that guy that teenager who invented the boom that was gonna like sieve up all the plastic is gonna save us. Like, why are you still working on that? I thought we were good. And when in fact, like Max has done an amazing job at like clearly pointing out, and through like cartoons, she's like made her own kind of like graphic novel basically about it, like why that doesn't work and why we're kind of deluding ourselves that it works, and that we need to be thinking in bigger ways. So she believes, and I believe as well, that innovation shouldn't be focused on the cleanup end of the problem. It needs to be focused on the production end of the problem, because the cleanup is never going to be good enough. I would encourage you to try to think around it. So if you think your idea needs you to buy $200 worth of metal, how can you adapt to find something similar but different, or what's the other way around it? And I think artists are so well equipped for this. I think that's my pride in being an art teacher. I just see the way my students can problem solve in material world, and the skills that they're actually making for themselves, real life skills, because they know where to find glitter toothpaste at 3 a.m. for free, or because that's what they need for their installation or whatever. It's incredible. It's just incredible what they're able to do. My answer is really basic. Dog memes, cat memes sometimes too, but mostly dog memes. But I think, for me, I get stressed when I feel like I'm not being honest with myself or other people. To me, the kind of Stepford Wives version of the world is way more anxiety producing than the okay, now let's get real and just talk about where we're at. I feel okay, then even if it's almost rock bottom, at least we know where we are. It's the delusion that depresses me. So I try to avoid delusion. But dog memes do help, seriously. If you have any good ones, I'm actively soliciting them.
Thank you so much, Kelly.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for your attention and staying in the chat room.